Good morning and welcome to Imparting Wisdom, HBCU Lessons for K-12 Education. My name is Evelyn Pierce Hicks, and I will be your moderator for this session. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. Remember, if you have a question, please type it in the question and answer box, and we will get to it as soon as possible. At the end of the session, you will be redirected to the session survey. Please complete the session survey. Your answers will help us with planning for next year's conference. I would like to open the session with our first panelist, Andrea Neely.
Andrea Neely, Regional Development Director for UNCF local office, and I'm honored to be a part of today's discussion regarding imparting wisdom in the K-12 education space. Just want to share again about UNCF and HBCUs. We're going to share HBCUs best practices, cultivating, nurturing support systems, leveraging African-American culture and identity, and setting high expectations, regional area office impact, and call to action and conclusion. You'll have a Q&A with myself, Dr. Meredith Anderson, who is our Director of Research of K-12 Advocacy and the Frederick D. Patterson Institute, as well as Terrence Dixon, Vice President of Enrollment Management and Student Success at Shaw University, and Sekou Biddle, Vice President of Advocacy and Student Professional Development Programs. Let's get started. Next slide. Imparting wisdom and HBCU best practice about UNCF. UNCF is the largest and most effective minority education organization and the largest private scholarship provider to minority group members in the country. Since being founded in 1944, we are 77 years young, and we have raised more than $5 billion to help more than 500,000 students receive college degrees, including those from Indiana that attend HBCUs, as well as our Indiana State institutions. We also provide financial support for our 37 member institutions, which are, again, the private HBCUs. And again, with the goal of providing scholarships, capacity building dollars, conduct cutting edge research for minority education advocates for equitable policies, and funding for minority education students and students from low income families. Next slide. UNCF's manifesto. This is what we believe in. And so we believe that if students are academically prepared for college, we radically can change the history and what's possible, not just for African-American students, but for African-American community as a whole. UNCF is passionately invested in transforming dreams of college reality, and will continue to push until who want to go to college are afforded the opportunity. And in doing so, we have an overview of the work that we're doing to ensure that. And that is for students to be able to go to college and be college ready. We need to ensure that their K-12 educational experience is preparing them to excel in college and beyond. As a result, we believe that students must attend a quality school that offers the rigor for college preparation, have effective teachers in each of their classes who can guide them through the challenging course and that also looks like them, understand how to navigate critical decisions along in their K-12 journey. And that's very important, particularly for families, being able to have a voice to participate in the quality of education that one's child receive the guidance of mentoring from adults who can help them navigate. Mentorship is very important for a student's success and a family success of just knowing the process, to have a voice, to activate the voice and engage in the process. And of course, accountability, holding schools, systems, and teachers to ensure they're getting the quality education that we need them to have and they deserve to have. And then of course, immense in a college going culture that college is a goal. It may not be for all, but the preparation is to ensure that everyone's successful. Next slide. The impact of UNCF, this work is nationally and it's also regional. UNCF and the Indianapolis Regional Office has many resources that we make available statewide. We have representation and scholarship programs throughout the state, such as the Fort Wayne Scholarship Program, as well as the Anthem Corporate Scholars, Strata Education Network, the UNCF Northwest Indiana Scholarship, Teachers Credit Union Scholarship, Duke Energy, and we have one that we're launching next month, is the Eli Lilly Scholarship Program. These resources UNCF makes available throughout the entire state of Indiana. And for us, it's important to ensure that you're aware that we work with our superintendents throughout the state of Indiana. We work with our teachers, our parents, engaging in very deep conversations about opportunities, resources, to ensure that we're guiding and supporting everyone to the end goal of having a wonderful education in the schools of your choice and graduating and then progressing into the workforce. In 2021, UNCF exceeded its annual campaign, noting that significant dollars were returned back into the community, over 111 scholarships provided to students throughout the state of Indiana at an investment level of $600,000. We have resources from having scholarship workshops coming to various schools. That means working with our superintendents throughout the state to provide opportunity for UNCF to provide a scholarship workshop. And so working with your 21st century scholars, families, and students that we touch to ensure that they're getting the resources necessary to either attend state schools as well as HBCUs with the resources that we have available. We're here, we're located at 3737 North Meridian, and we'll be able to provide additional contact information for obtaining resources throughout the state of Indiana with UNCF. Next slide. And what is an HBCU? And so Higher Education Act of 1965, as amended, defines HBCU as any historically Black college or university that was established prior to 1964. A minority serving institution in Indiana, that is, Martin University. And so that is our partner in this work. That is not a HBCU, but is a minority serving institution that we in fact partner with and support. HBCUs offer all students, regardless of race, an opportunity to develop their skills and talents. And these institutions train young people to go and to serve domestically and internationally in professions as entrepreneurs and in the public and private sector. Next slide. Why an HBCU? During these times now, it's very important that our students, particularly those students of color, having options and opportunities that are going to help enrich the culture that for them helps them identify with who they are in the presence. And so HBCUs gives that ability for students to have choices, and they're more likely to thrive, our students of color, in a purpose and financial well-being that Black graduates who did not receive their degrees from HBCU. Let me say that again to be clear. Black HBCU graduates are more likely to thrive in purpose and financial well-being than Black students who did not receive their degrees from HBCUs. Again, understanding purpose and culture, who they are. When you are the majority, not the minority, HBCUs gives a different presence. I have two children, went to Clark, my oldest, my daughter's now, middle daughter's graduating from Xavier, New Orleans, to private schools here in Indiana. And they had an awakening by going to an HBCU about who they are and their voice and how to leverage that. And that came from attending an HBCU. HBCU or Black HBCU graduates are more likely than non to graduate strongly and to engage and be prepared from universities for a well life outside of college. That's 55% to 29%, and to be engaged at work, 39% to 33%. Black graduates of HBCUs report more support and higher engagement. My children all support and are engaged in volunteering and giving back and serving with purpose. HBCUs outperform retention and graduation expectations given the profile of students they enroll and resources they have to help them succeed. This is the information again provided by the Gallup Poll of USA Fund's Minority College Graduates Report, and this information is available to you. HBCUs are making a difference, and HBCUs make America strong. Next slide. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. So thank you, Andrea. So, again, going back into why an HBCU. So our research from the UNCF's HBCU Effect shows that just after 3 years after graduation, HBCU students annually earn 10,000 more than students that only earned a high school diploma. But we also know that the average cost of attendance at an HBCU is lower than other four-year non-HBCUs. And then again, we know that HBCUs only represent about 3% of America's colleges and universities, but they produce about 16% of the bachelor's degrees and 20% of those in the STEM degrees. So again, we know that HBCUs, like Andrea mentioned earlier, are making a difference, and we want to ensure that we're uplifting these institutions. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dr. Meredith Anderson. I'm the Director of K-12 Research at UNCF on the K-12 advocacy team. So I want to share a little bit about a report we released at the start of 2020. Actually, we were able to actually produce a hard copy and be in person before the pandemic hit, but we released this report at the top of the year entitled Imparting Wisdom, HBCU Lessons for K-12 Education. So essentially we wanted was figure out what some of these best practices at HBCUs that we could pass on into the K-12 sector, especially for schools that are populated with the similar populations of students for majority Black schools and districts. So we know that there are several, HBCU best practices that we could have talked about. Well, we kind of whittled them down into 3 basic lessons, and I'll talk to them a little bit in an overview in terms of the theory and what this looks like and some of the recommendations we found for the K-12 era. But then I'll also pass it on to Mr. Dixon to talk about what does this look like practically at Shaw University. And so the 3 lessons really are cultivating nurturing support systems, leveraging African-American culture and identity, and setting high expectations. So getting into the first lesson. So the first lesson is cultivating nurturing support systems. So we know that HBCUs promote a high level of student and faculty interaction. We know that, as Andrea mentioned earlier, that our students feel supported, and they do that because they have that faculty engagement. But not only that, they have faculty that look like them. So when thinking about the instructional staff at HBCUs, about 56% of the instructional staff are African-American, compared to 6% at non-HBCUs at other public and private institutions. So we know that students, that representation matters not only on the K-12 level, but it matters on the higher education level. And so we see that connection makes a difference. It makes a difference for mentorship, but it also makes a difference in making sure that students feel supported academically. But we also know that HBCUs employ intrusive advising, and they're proactive in their advising approach. And in the report, we talk about this in a little bit more detail about how, for example, a faculty member, may come knocking on a student's door in their dorm, or making sure that they're reaching out to them and making sure that they're not really slipping through the cracks, excuse me. And Mr. Dixon will talk a little bit more about this at Shaw and what this looks like on the ground. And so relatedly, we talk about the lessons for the K-12 sector. So one of the lessons that we talk about is making sure that districts and schools invest in quality advising and support systems. And so again, this may look like ensuring that the school counselors and psychologists and social workers are adequately supported. For example, in Indiana, the student to counselor ratio is 486 to 1, whereas the American School Counselor Association recommends a 250-to-1 ratio. So we know that there's a capacity issue there, and making sure that students are having that support. One of the other suggested lessons we discuss in the report is making sure that schools and districts and charter management organizations are really making intentional efforts to recruit teachers who reflect that student body, similar to what we've seen at HBCUs. We've seen research from as far as back as 1989 that really shows the importance of having Black teachers for not only Black students, but for all students. And so I just want to turn it over to Mr. Dixon to talk a little bit about this particular lesson and some of the ways that this is manifested at Shaw.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I'm Terrence Dixon, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Success at Shaw University. And, this is really great timing because we're in the process of reevaluating our entire retention and success programming. And it will and still does involve what we are employing intrusive advising. All of our students are required to go through an academic advising process prior to the registration process, but it's much more than that. This is really much more around making sure students are on the track of doing the things that they come to college to do. 68% of students that go to college typically go to college to get jobs. So our advising approach is much more about making sure the students are in the right courses, but understanding the courses that they're in and connecting them to career paths in the way that they find success upon graduation. So we are spending a tremendous amount of time now working with our young people as they come to the college and learning more to the university and more about them prior to coming to us. So we'll spend a lot of time trying to learn as much about them prior to them getting to us, so we know how to best serve them as a holistic student, making sure that they are assimilate to the environment well and orient them in ways that benefit them and help them to find their own paths on our campus. So I think that this is really this work is extremely important on our campuses and HBCUs, and particularly here at Shaw. We take this work very serious. Shaw is a private liberal arts place, prided in teaching and learning, and so this is right in our wheelhouse. And so we want to make sure that we're touching students in a way that allows them to understand that we care about who they are and how they identify, and their success is our business. And getting them into a situation where they're able to come to the university, choose a academic path that leads to successful career paths in 4 years.
Thank you. Exactly. So, similar to, what we see here, that, HBCUs are going the extra mile to ensure that, students are supported learning before they get there, learning about them and their backgrounds before they get there. So the next lesson that I want to go over is leveraging African-American culture and identity. And for some reason, it's not letting me share my video, but that's all right. So the other lesson is making sure that we're promoting student engagement based on culture. So we know that HBCUs utilize campus rituals and oh, there it goes, and curriculum to promote student learning and connection to that institution. But we also know that they develop a strong institutional culture and making sure that students feel affirmed. Given the climate that we're in, it's important that students are seen, that they're seen not only in the classroom, but they're seen in the text, that they're affirmed, that they see history makers and innovators that look like them. And at our HBCUs, we ensure that that's the case. They also develop a strong sense of self-identity, like we said, cultivating higher levels of racial and self-consciousness in the students. And we saw that in the Gallup poll that we discussed earlier. But then also taking advantage of the compositional diversity on campus to facilitate student success, making sure that our HBCUs are creating an inclusive and welcoming environment for students to learn. Similarly, with what Mr. Dixon shared earlier, making sure that their students felt supported. We see that across the board at our HBCUs. And so one thing that we discussed on the K-12 level was making sure that schools really infuse culturally relevant pedagogy into their instructional practices. practice. And this might look like not just in history lessons, but how can we talk about innovators in mathematics or science when we're discussing various subjects? So it's not just, secluded to Black History Month, but how can we really think about the ways that we're talking about race and the contribution of Black people, but then also of HBCU graduates within our text as well. Also, we discussed how HBCUs, like HBCUs, they have various affinity groups for students. So on the K-12 level, we talked about how schools should be able to establish such groups so that students are able to feel affirmed in their race and culture. So those are some of the lessons for that particular lesson. And if Terrence has some other lessons that this looks like at Shaw, if you want to share some of those as well.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I think that for us, it really is about making sure students understand that how they identify with themselves and their own culture. On the Shaw campus, you may come to the campus and see students that look of the same hue, but they are definitely different from one another. And we want them to understand their differences and be able to understand how to respect each other in those differences on our campus. And so we have a population of international students on our campus too. But when you walk onto our campus, it's really interesting to find how different and the backgrounds and the way our students approach the educational process. And bringing them into our environment really brings us to some sense of finding some continuity and helping them understand how to establish their own personal identities, and then bring them into affinity groups that allow them to connect to their passions and the things that they're looking to aspire to do while they're matriculating at Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, seeing our HBCUs, making sure that they are going the extra mile for our students to make sure that they're affirmed, that they're heard, and that they're seen. And lastly, we want to talk about the lesson of setting high expectations. So we know that HBCUs, set the bar high for students, that when you step into an HBCU campus, it's not only culturally affirming, but the academics are rigorous. And so we want to make sure that our HBCUs, and we know that that's the case, that they promote high levels of graduate student enrollment. Between 2013 and 2017, 7 of the top 10 universities where Black science and engineering PhD graduates earned their degrees were from HBCUs. So we know that HBCUs are outperforming in terms of ensuring students are attending graduate school, but then also encouraging students to reach their desired goals through mentorship. We know that HBCUs, again, like we said in the Gallup poll earlier, that HBCU students are more likely to say they feel supported by their faculty members, but also that they have mentors on campus to go to. And so again, we know our HBCUs are doing that very well, but we also want to share those lessons to the K-12 sector. So one thing that we discussed in the report and a little bit in more detail is maintaining high expectations for all students on the K-12 level and really dismantling this belief gap in schools. And that may look like how we talk about our students of color, making sure that we're not always talking about them in a deficit manner and that we're uplifting them and making sure that we believe in our students to perform up to their potential. But then we also wanted to talk about how we ignite excitement about going to college by creating intentional college-going cultures in schools. And in the report, we talk about this can be manifested in a couple of different ways. There's Michelle Obama's Reach Higher initiative, where she does the college signing day that promotes greater student enrollment in college. There's also some schools, for example, some charter schools like KIPP, they name student classrooms they name student classrooms after colleges. So again, it's just thinking about ways that schools can really be intentional in their outreach and making sure that students are ready for college and just creating that atmosphere of college readiness. And so Terrence, if you want to talk a little bit about this setting high expectations at Shaw.
Absolutely. I mean, as I stated, we're starting a new project in the fall that will do exactly this. Many of our students that graduated this past spring went on to places like Columbia and NYU to graduate schools and those types of things. However, Shaw, uniquely sitting in downtown Raleigh, 13 miles up the Research Triangle, obviously has a real passion around making sure students are presented the most possible wonderful opportunities they can get, right? And so this mentorship and connecting them to our communities around us and connecting our faculty to those communities that allow our students to have those opportunities for internship, to help them make decisions about whether or not it's going to be graduate or professional school, or is it going to be going into the workforce, and they're being prepared to go into the workforce when they leave Shaw. And so that all kind of combines the work that we talked about previously around the intrusive academic advisement and the nurturing process that we do on our campus to ensure that our students have the best possible opportunities during their matriculation for internship, and most definitely upon graduation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's really important, like you mentioned, Terrence, in terms of, how that we're offering mentorships and mentoring and internships. We surveyed African-American parents across the country, and one of the top things they wanted for their students was making sure that they had internships, hands-on experience. And so I think that's very important that you all are offering that for students early on, so they can get that experience to be able to get into the careers that they choose. So lastly, I just want to review what our call to action was in the report. So the first call to action is that HBCUs and K-12 schools, especially those with similar populations, should develop strong, mutually beneficial partnerships and pipelines. And Sekou in just a minute will talk about what that can look like practically. But again, just thinking about ways that we can partner. We know several HBCUs actually have have K-12 schools on their campus, like Bennett, for example, Howard University, Lemoyne Owens, for example. So several HBCUs are getting involved into the K-12 sector, but then we also recommend that schools, districts, and networks and college access programs really should work in collaboration with HBCUs to develop a cadre of minority teachers and administrators who can really serve their students effectively. We know the importance of having racial representation, but we also know it's important to have that HBCU representation intersected with that, making sure that students see faculty, see teachers and counselors that went to HBCUs and that they can talk about their experiences, and just having that personal experience with teachers can really help students develop a little bit more. So those are some of the call to actions that we have there, and Sekou will talk a little bit more in detail about what this looks like.
Thank you very much, Meredith and Terrence, for all that. And thanks for Evelyn for moderating this conversation, for Andrea for opening things up. Much appreciation to all the folks at IBE for giving us this opportunity to share a little bit about some of what we've learned about what can be in place to help young people succeed in K-12 education, and hopefully continue on a trajectory to some post-secondary education, and hopefully many of them on to success in HBCUs. Full disclosure, in addition to being Vice President of Advocacy and Student Professional Development Programs at UNCF. Once again, my name is Sekou Biddle. I'm also a graduate of an HBCU. I graduated from Morehouse College many, many years ago. And both of my parents also attended HBCUs. So this is, I think there's a lot here that we've learned. And just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, we initially started on the path of this report and sort of investigating this work when we were asked by some K-12 leaders years ago if there were some insights around what was needed to help support African-American students being successful in school that we might glean from the work of HBCUs. And I think that we began to dig into and correlate, and Dr. Anderson talked you through some of the lessons. And we have been working since then with a number of partners and a number of communities to help share this information and explore how we might apply this more directly in K-12 settings. So some of you all may have seen, we held a virtual community conversation with educators in Indiana and in Indianapolis area, several HBCU graduates who are currently K-12 education leaders, both within IPS and other school districts in the area, to share some of the lessons they learned from their personal HBCU experience and how they were applying and transmitting them into K-12 education in the area. And we would love to work with more partners on that. Now for several years, we have been working with partners in and around the state of Indiana on this. And you can see, sorry, I'm a step behind. And you can see here that we believe that it's important to both get students onto HBCU campuses. I think some of the things that Terrence talked about are really important and profound. And it's not just some of the obvious things or some of the things that we've shared in the learnings here. But I take a place like Shaw University, and many young people wouldn't know this without studying it or stepping onto the campus, that the integral role Shaw University had in the civil rights movement in this country. And, my mother was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and they celebrated their 60th year being founded on the campus of Shaw University 61 years ago. And so it's both the educational experience that HBCUs have for students, but also the grounding in the historical perspective of the African-American experience in this country for decades. And so we believe there's certainly the need for students to get onto campuses and learn more about and have more touch and feel in the experience. I actually was in a conversation yesterday with a recent college graduate who mentioned to me that he had several years ago attended a homecoming on an HBCU campus. And he said that it was, this was after he graduated from college somewhere else. So this was the first time he'd been on a college campus where he felt welcomed and at home, and felt like he had missed out on something in his college experience by not having had this experience in his life. And so we believe getting students on the campus is hugely important. Obviously, partnering K-12 institutions with HBCUs is hugely important. There are a number of ways. Meredith talked about some HBCUs actually have schools in their campuses, and we're also working with several schools right now to build both recruiting partnerships and pipelines, both to bring high school students to HBCUs and to explore attending those institutions, but also to touch to one of the historical roles HBCUs have had and pipeline educators and graduates from HBCUs back into the K-12 education system so that we can continue to bring those grounded personal lessons into K-12 education. And then we think there's always ways to build local partnerships. I was actually just reading a story today about a school leader who's been trying to build essentially the HBCU look and feel in a K-12 school that he is leading. I think there's always room for that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to bring HBCU graduates into the K-12 sector, because you just bring such a rich depth of history and experience to students and help expose students into so much that can be helpful to them. Next slide, please. To the end of helping more students and more schools connect to the learnings from HBCUs and also to help young people explore them, we have actually worked for several years to create some resources. So these links we'll send back out to you all and follow up to the session. But we've got an HBCU resource guide that gives a lot of information to young people about HBCUs and how they can learn more and more about several institutions themselves, but also a readiness checklist to help young people think about and explore how to manage their college application process. As we know, for a lot of young people, part of the challenge they face is not having a clear roadmap to how to begin exploring and learning more about college and how to pursue the college application experience. So we've got resources on those as well. And as you no doubt all know, there continues to be a national conversation around the cost of college. And I think one of the challenges here is that we're allowing, in many cases, the high sticker price of college to scare families and students away from considering college attendance. I think the financial challenge, the economic challenge we've seen in our country in the last year only remind us of the power of a college degree and the access to wealth building for a family. Over and over and over again, in every downturn, every recession, having a college degree, as we all know, is essentially insurance against the downturns and unemployment that we see for folks who do not have a college degree. So we believe strongly in college as a pathway to greater economic prosperity for young people. But we also know that there are financial barriers. And so UNCF, as some of you all know, is second only to the federal government in terms of dollars sent out on behalf of students to help them attend college through scholarships and grants and other programs. So we would certainly recommend having students and adults who are working with them to explore the many scholarship programs. We currently are administering somewhere around 400 different scholarship programs at UNCF. And Thurgood Marshall Fund also administers a number of programs as well for HBCUs in addition to that. And then the Empower Me Tour is a way that we bring information about college attendance, and what students need to know about getting ready for college to them in their communities. And we've obviously done this in person for years. In the last year, we have done this virtually, but the Empower Me Tour, you can learn more about it online, is an opportunity for students to actually meet staff representatives from several institutions in their community, learn more about college. They will take applications and oftentimes grant acceptance to students on the premises. So it's a great opportunity for young people to learn more about college. Next slide, please. These are the resources we mentioned earlier. Obviously, the Imparting Wisdom is a report that we've been referencing, and then the HBCU Resource Guide and the Getting into College checklist we think are important tools to help young people explore their college going journey and HBCUs in particular. And if we're gonna, I think in a moment, pivot into questions. So I think if we could move to the next slide, there's the link to finding the Imparting Wisdom link on the UNCF website, a copy of the actual report there. And we would love for people to share more information about our work and this report by sharing this tweet online with their networks to help more people learn about the work of Imparting Wisdom in UNCF in this space. And with that, I think we're going to pivot to questions. So Evelyn, take it away.
Thank you. We do have questions in the chat. Again, I want to say thank you to our panel. I'm going to the chat now. The first question is from Dr. Gwen Kelly. How does the Indiana Higher Education Commission work to ensure that students are aware of HBCU support, scholarships, and awards?
Andrea, you want to take a stab at that?
So that's a great question. And as it relates to insurance, we work with them as it relates to scholarships that may be available for teaching, but not necessarily directing them to our HBCU. So in that answers that we have to find ways to better get the support and advocacy for that through the state. But I am not aware of them working with UNCF of making that connection happen directly at this point.
Thank you. The next question is from Ashana Hampton. As an HBCU graduate, due to UNCF scholarships and working in public education for over 8 years in the Midwest, how can we promote HBCUs in K-12 with knowing UNCF can provide scholarships? It is definitely promoted in the South.
Meredith, you want to talk a little about what we've been doing there?
Sure. So, that's an excellent question. I think something that we've been doing at UNCF has really been trying to reach to the counselors, because we know that they're often a bridge between the students, between the parents. And so what we've been doing is trying to train counselors about HBCUs. We've also been listening to HBCU students. And so we listened to about 100 HBCU students and over probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And what we often heard was that, their school counselors kind of dissuaded them from attending HBCUs. They pushed more of the state schools. And so what we're really trying to do is provide that information. Like we talked about with the HBCU Resource Guide, we want to be able to disseminate that to not only to districts and schools in the South, but into the Midwest to make sure that they're learning more. We want schools and districts to, reach out to us so we can provide that information. Like I mentioned, the HBCU Resource Guide has information on notable HBCU graduates. It has a list of all HBCUs. That was one thing when we talked to counselors across the country. Some of them were asking, well, we don't even know, who the HBCUs are. We just want a list. So we provided a list. We provided everything there in one place. And so that's one way we've been doing it. We've also been engaging in some research to really just hear from counselors and students and teachers to understand what are some of the gaps and how we can reach out to them further. But that has been some of the ways that we've been doing that work.
Thank you. The next question is from Martina Myers. How do you reverse the thought of a student who already has a fixed mindset that he or she is stupid in order to make them ready for college or even consider it?
Yeah, I think that's a powerful question. I mean, one, I think that they hit the nail on the head about mindset. We've got to work with all students to not have fixed mindsets. I mean, we're all growing and learning, and all of us are a work in progress and have a lot to learn. And I think part of it is helping students understand that, the thing about college is it's really not about like some intelligence threshold you have to get over to get in. It's really more about, are you interested in learning, and are you willing to put in the work necessary to learn and grow and go forward, which is, to be perfectly honest, not much different than it is in any other walk of life. And I think what we have to help more young people understand is that as they move from their K-12 experience into college, into the world of work, life and work and school are going to be challenging. There just isn't an easy way. And, they have to ask themselves, what are the set of skills that they have, tools they have that they want to continue to further develop to help them find their way in the world and on to successful career? Because I think many, many, many young people, without a doubt, have the academic, skills to get there. They need more encouragement. I think, Terrence talked about this earlier, more support from institutions. And that includes, post-secondary, but also it includes K-12 institutions to help young people realize that I think the reality of the world we live in today, very few people for the next several decades will find themselves graduating from high school and going into the world of work for the remainder of their career and not requiring some kind of post-secondary education, whether that's 4-year college or not. And so we've got to help all young people realize that K-12 was just like their sort of starter part of learning, but they're going to spend the rest of their life learning in the world of work and in post-secondary education.
Sekou, I would add to that a little bit by just saying that it's always important to just make sure that you expose students to individuals that look like them that may have come from HBCUs. It's really about making sure you connect to HBCUs, whether they're in the state of Indiana or if you make the trek south, please look me up in Raleigh because it's a campus full of them. And if you come to North Carolina, what I'm calling the sweet spot of HBCUs, there is just a plethora of opportunity for young people that don't have a mindset of thinking about going to college because they don't really have some sense of understanding themselves or being able to see people that look like them or identify with people that look like them that are in those settings and are being successful and on positive trajectory, that may be just very helpful to reach out to those HBCUs, set up some times to get them on their campuses and engage the students that are currently matriculating at those institutions.
Thank you. The next question from Tanisha Allen. As an educator and scholarship strategist myself, how do you suggest scholars and parents work with, how do they work best to utilize the UNCS portal outside of locating scholarships?
I would say one thing is, so on our website, we have a tab that says UNCF for. And so if you click that tab, it has a UNCF for parents, a UNCF for students, and there's a UNCF, I think, even for churches. So if you can click that, it has several places where you can just learn more on the outreach page on UNCF, it has various different blogs and posts about why an HBCU, why choose UNCF, what has been the impact that we've had over several years. So I think that's one way. I think also there's on our website on the K-12 advocacy team, if you go to uncf.org/K-12 advocacy, we have several resources there, from the HBCU resource guide to various statistics related to K-12 education. We also have a guide that talks about questions that parents should ask their teachers about making sure that their child is getting an equitable education. And so we have that checklist available under resources and reports, but you can also review several of our reports that we've released from as far back as 2012, and we are constantly updating that with content and information. And so we would suggest you look at that as well. And then, of course, like you said, the scholarships is important, and we just really encourage parents to make sure that they're asking their students to create a profile so they can find scholarships that fit best with them.
Thank you.
And let me add to Dr. Anderson's comment. UNCF has a regional office located at 3737 North Meridian. And so outside resources that we have the ability to come in and meet with students. So if you have a youth group within the school, or if you have your college ready group within the various schools, we come out and actually meet with parents and students. And it's not just your high school students, it is your your early learners as well, as early as 6th grade, that again, we're coming, engaging, and introducing, and as well as making resources available through partnerships. So understand that we are available to come out, to be a participant in programs that you have, to show the resources that UNCF has, and to help those students kind of plan and map to where they're ultimately wanting to go. And that includes helping connect with 21st century scholarships. So it's not limited to, particularly within the state of Indiana. UNCF has a role in which we serve that we can support in those efforts as well.
Thank you. Next question from Shauna Hampton. What can I do to get Tuskegee University as one of the partnerships to promote HBCUs in K-12?
I'll take a stab at that one. I'm an institutional guy, right? The best way to get our attention is just to reach out to the campus. I'm sure my friends and colleagues over at Tuskegee would love to hear from you and partner with you. They have a full Office of Enrollment Management there and recruitment and admissions. So reaching out to them to let them know you have an interest, or may have students that you want to connect to Tuskegee, I'm sure they'll be able to do that, as will any of the member schools of UNCF that may have an students may have an interest in. So, like Sekou, I am an HBCU alum. I am a Morehouse graduate. So I chuckle when I see that, and Sekou understands why. There's a great love and rivalry between Morehouse and Tuskegee, and I chuckle because it's a great place. But in all seriousness, if you really want to reach out to HBCUs or form those partnerships, just let them know. And I think they'd be more than willing to allow you to understand their capacities of being able to serve them.
Thank you.
That's right. And because because I'm a paid employee of UNCF, I love all 37 of our member institutions equally. So Shannon, if you want to reach out to us, Meredith and I are actually working with all of our member institutions related to Imparting Wisdom and another couple of reports that we've done. So if you'd like to connect with us sometime, we'd love to work with you and the folks at Tuskegee on this specifically, as well as we continue to tour this around to many communities around the country. And we'd love to have more conversations like this in other places across the state of Indiana as well.
Thank you. The next question. Elena Ross Jones, did you get your answer? She wanted to know, can you put the link to the guide in the chat?
I think Meredith just did that.
Yeah, I just dropped it there for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Shuto or Shut, how do you reverse the thought that seems to promote that being smart is uncool? It seems that more students view being smart as a negative characteristic?
Yeah, I got a real hip hop answer to this one. It's an interesting thing that people still find a way to say something like that. Because if you just survey the landscape of like people we consider to be successful, the thing that they talk about first may not be about how smart they are, but it is always about the hustle and the grind. And I think that's really what we need to be promoting with students. Like at the end of the day, actually, smart is actually only marginally important. It is really all about like how hard you will hustle, how hard you'll work, and like what your grind is really all about. And like that's what kids need to be focused on, because there's lots of smart people who get outworked every single day. And so I would, lean toward, and I've got two kids, one in college, one in high school right now, that like being smart is good and useful and helpful. But at the end of the day, like, and also, I would tell young people, smart is like, we got to sit down and give you a test and assessment to determine like whether or not you're smart. Like the hard work, people just see that, like they can see you doing it, and that people value it. And let's be super real with kids. Like people pay for it, right? People are willing to hire and pay people who they see work and work and work. And like, that's what they need to be about. No one's calling you up asking you like, can I see your test scores as a determination of whether I'm gonna offer you this job. They want to see what your hustle is all about.
And I would just quickly add to that I'm the researcher on the team, and we surveyed African American students a couple of years ago and asked them, what's most important to them. And the number one thing was, success in school. And it was other competing factors about being popular, being famous. But they talked about wanting to graduate. Close to 90% said they wanted to attend college. And so I think it's also, making sure that we're uplifting some of those voices that do want to go to college and do think that, achieving success is important. And also that we're, dismantling some of those narratives too about, their thoughts about their own success.
Thank you. Tia Swan, would you consider UNCF to be a good place for HBCU grads to reach out to if they're desiring to help impact the K-12 space if they don't know where or how to start? I am thinking of folks who are not involved in education through their work. Or is there another organization that you would recommend?
Yes, absolutely. And you can reach any one of us at firstname.lastname@UNCF. We'd be more than happy to work with you on this as soon as possible. Looking forward to hearing from you, Tia.
Yep. And Tia, if you can also, if I just plug, we do have an advocacy guide on our K-12 website, the Lift Every Voice and Lead Community Leaders Guide. And so that actually has some tips for getting engaged, even if you're not in education. What are some of the ways that you can think about op-eds, Twitter chats, just various ways to get involved. And again, contact us. We can get you more involved in that, but I also want to direct you to some of our resources. And I will put a link to it in the chat.
Thank you. Stephanie Fields, is there a central place that students and parents can get information about attending HBCU college tours so that they can see others who look like them attending college?
Yes, and where I would start, Meredith mentioned this earlier, is on the UNCF website. We've got several tabs on the front page. And if you click on the, for students and for parents, there you'll find information about both Empower Me Tour, which is the tours that we bring to campuses, learn more about. We've also got our outreach guide there and several outreach resources to help young people learn more about the schools and the institutions. And I would, go back to Andrea again and point out, like, definitely reach out to the regional office. They're more than willing to help you connect to resources they have. We are, to some of the things we talked about, we're bringing HBCU leaders to this community on a regular basis to help connect. and they are interested in having more young people from communities that are more distant from HBCUs to visit their campuses as well. So we're happy to help on that front.
Thank you.
And
Gay
I would like to
Johnson.
just go back and just also bring another resource. We have our newest team member, Alyssa and Mink, and she is leading the K-12 advocacy work in the regional office as well. So again, we have resources on the development side, but also on the community engagement and activation side as well here in the city.
Thank you. So they just need to contact your office. Right. Gay Johnson. Implicit biases embedded in the hearts and minds of those in key positions impacting student information and thought processes.
Yeah, as Dr. Anderson would share, I bring this up in our team meetings all the time. Like, look, some things have changed, but one fundamental thing has not changed. It's still hard to be Black in America. And, that's why I appreciate this group being here and IBE having this platform. We are out here working every day and building partnerships and connections with community members and leaders in an attempt to make it at least a little bit easier to be Black in America and to be Black and educated in America, which will also make it easier. Because it's a hard uphill slog against the downward impact of racism in our society. And I think that one of the things that has been lost for many years for many people is the challenges that young people face, even in their college experience, when they're on the wrong campus or in the wrong community. And I think that there's a lot that young people and their families need to be thinking about when they choose a college to make sure that it is the right supportive environment for them.
Thank you. Mary Hennanen. Do you support transfer from community college to HBCUs or from BS to MS?
Yeah, Mary, that's a great question. There are actually a number of communities that have articulation agreements between two-year institutions and a number of HBCUs. California jumps out at me because they actually have an agreement for their entire state two-year program that students can transfer after completing 2 years to a list of about 40 HBCUs that will give them full credit for their coursework and put them on their way to a 4-year degree. And I know the city colleges of Chicago also have a number of articulation agreements. I know more and more organizations, more and more communities are doing this. In part, to be perfectly frank, a lot of this is about how do we help push down the cost of a 4-year degree for students. And in many of those communities, states and cities are making the 2-year degree almost cost neutral to students. So we're helping them get their first 2 years of college under their belt, transfer to a 4-year HBCU, have 2 years on campus, get a 4-year degree, and it really ends up only costing the students all in with a 4-year degree what would have cost them for 2 years. So we absolutely support that and looking to build even more and more of those partnerships and articulation agreements. And Terrence,
And I would
piggyback
on that, Sekou. Actually, we are engaged with both of the organizations that you spoke, both city colleges and university system of California, community college system in California. But I think that more importantly is it's really making sure that in some cases students aren't quite ready for that first year on some of our campuses. And so the community college space for the first year is also great. We also offer those opportunities for them to go in that first year and then be able to transfer into a sophomore year, even out of some of those agreements, and still use some of those hours that they're earning on our campus for reverse transfer back to their community college to earn the A while they're matriculating. So there are many ways to do this to help, as Sekou mentioned, to help reduce some of the cost to families, but also providing students with many more opportunities and options while they're matriculating on our campuses to earn internships and to be stronger candidates for permanent placement for hire in the private sector and or preparing themselves for graduate or professional schools. So we are very transfer friendly. at Shaw, and love to speak with anyone that has connection to community colleges or students that are in the community college that may be in Indiana that may be looking to transfer to a place like Shaw.
And let me add, here in Indianapolis, UNCF is currently in conversation with Ivy Tech, as our reach is statewide, as well as Ivy Tech being the only statewide community college, are looking to relaunch our Bridge program, which allows students from Ivy Tech to complete their associates, then transfer to the selected UNCF membered institutions with identified scholarships in that program. So stay tuned as they're transitioning with Lorenzo, and it's the new chancellor, Central Indiana. There was great discussion around that opportunity statewide in Indiana.
Thank you. Lisa Rose, as a Clark Atlanta University grad and a school counselor, I use every opportunity to expose students to information about the HBCUs. My concern is adequate access to finances to attend and complete degree programs. Indiana has the 21st Century Scholars Program to finance their education, but restricts students who would be interested in and benefit from an HBCU education, being there is no HBCU in Indiana. That is a frustration I have, as well as students who are interested in attending. How do we combat this concern?
Yeah, I love this question, Lisa, and this is something I think we would be interested in exploring with you and with others. I think there's a public policy issue here. I live in DC. We actually have a tuition assistance grant program that's designed to help support young people attending state institutions. It actually does have a funding amount for students attending private HBCUs. I think this is something that we have to nationally begin to explore further. Some of the evidence that Meredith shared earlier and Andrea shared, like, we just know the data and the facts around the benefits for HBCUs for young people. And we have to begin to push against the policy levers to make it so that these institutions are more accessible to more young students who they're better for, and stop making families choose based on price institutions that are not good for their children. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, that's the problem that we're forcing many families into, is make a decision based on price, even though it's a less good place for your child. And no parent should have to do that. But I think this is a policy question. I mean, when I applaud, let me be clear, I applaud all the states that commit financial resources to help students attend college and make college more affordable. I think we just need to evolve some of these plans and strategies to make them better fit the needs of the students they're trying to help. Because in some cases, they're spending the right amount of money, but the policies they're using aren't right size for the students they're trying to help. And we would love to engage in a conversation and supporting leaders like you all in a place like Indiana to think about how might we help create a better policy solution for that.
Thank you. Adria Mabry, which schools outside of Indiana accept 21st Century Scholar students? I heard there are schools in North Carolina that partner with this program.
There are a number of institutions in North Carolina that do partner with the 21st Century Scholarship Program, and they're listed on the North Carolina state site for institutions. If you just go to our website there. But I think that it's really about exploring and staying in connection with UNCF and the work that they're doing with HBCUs and these scholarship programs. As Sekou mentioned, a lot of these things are policy issues that need to be broadened so that they're really serving the students that will really benefit from HBCUs. And the DC CAP program is one of those types of programs that really has benefited students coming out of the DC area to HBCUs.
Thank you. Dr. Gwen Kelly, how is your team working with high school advisors and counselors who may not understand the culture and know much about the value in helping students attend an HBCU?
So I think just some of the work that we've been doing, I would say it's three-pronged. One is the research. So we are engaged in research with these counselors to understand where the gaps, excuse me, what is some of the information, excuse me, that they need to learn more about our institutions. We're actually involved in 2 research studies. We're in the process now of recruiting high schools to participate in that. So if you're a high school that would like to participate in the study, please reach out to me, meredith.anderson@uncf.org. We're doing the research, but then we're doing trainings to ensure that school counselors know about our institutions. Like Sekou mentioned, several of the counselors, that we talk to just don't have that information. And also just making it real to them, talking to people that have graduated from HBCUs, having the school fairs. We've attended several school fairs at different different K-12 schools across the country, just to kind of talk to them about our resources and tools. And so that's one way we're doing that. But then also offering the resources, like I mentioned, the HBCU resource guide. And so again, we're happy to share that with you and your networks. We put it in the chat, but again, we're happy to share. But please reach out to us, excuse me, because that's definitely part of the work that we've been starting to do more in the past couple of years, is making sure that we're reaching directly to counselors. So please reach out to us. We'll be happy to partner with you, happy to present to school counselors, present to high school students. And that's some of the ways that we're trying to spread the word.
And let me piggyback on Dr. Anderson's comments. What we're doing here locally and across the state is that we are helping schools actually have panel discussions where we are bringing, experts such as Ruth Woods into the schools, using as an example, within Pike, within, Washington Townships. They're hosting sessions in which we actually speak with the counselors as well as the students, particularly the juniors and seniors. So we are available, to Dr. Anderson's point, to really come in and work with your counselors, taking them through our websites, actually training them. And that's happening now. We've been to various schools across the state, including working with the urban leagues in Northwest Indiana, Fort Wayne, and Indianapolis, of making ourselves available for workshops and sessions for training, not just the counselors, but other faculty on staff, because you need an advocate team that can also promote it and support it, because we know counselors have full students to manage. So we're available.
Thank you. Sarita Jackson, what summer program options are available through HBCUs for K-12 students that bridge gaps in educational attainment and that serves to enrich access and awareness to college resources, campus life, etc.? I'm familiar with National Society of Black Engineers program, which makes strides in this space. Others?
That's an excellent question. I know I'm familiar with a few. I actually think that it's more likely than not that more schools rather than not have some kind of summer bridge programs. I know Meredith and I have spoke with several school leaders. Certainly, I know a little bit about the programs at my alma mater, Morehouse, but I know that there are Philander Smith College in Arkansas has been building their enrollment significantly over the years, largely on the strength of summer bridge programs. Benedict College in South Carolina, similarly. I don't know if Terrence knows more about what's happening in North Carolina and Shaw in particular, but I know a lot of institutions are using this, in part related to a point that was brought up earlier. You have students who want to go to college, might not be convinced they have the academic preparation for it. And what they need is to get into a campus, experience a little bit of college life, and learn from people who are going to support them, what they need to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Sekou. We're in session now with the Summer Academy Institute with a program on our campus as we speak. But if you were to take a look at just the schools in North Carolina, I know North Carolina A&T has a summer summer program in their science areas. And so there are a number of institutions. If you take a look at just the member institutions of UNCF, or go to Thurgood Marshall and look at their institutions, and just pick any of those institutions' websites, I'm sure that it would speak very thoroughly around the summer programming and the types of programming that they have for students that are bridging either into their freshman year or summer enrichment programs for high schoolers that will be returning to high school the following fall.
Thank you. Tia Swan, thank you so much. I currently live in Ghana. I imagine the resources will point me to some things that I and others can do virtually. I appreciate this session and your passion for your work and our kids and community. Sharon Mayo, is there a good reference or resource that tells high school students and parents which non-HBCU campuses are most diverse and have a record of inclusivity?
Not that I know of. The only place that I could think of is perhaps the Department of Education, looking at their website that has links to various institutions, and you could narrow down by student population. So they have a system called iPads that you could look at the various racial representation. That's one system. Also, I believe the National Student Clearinghouse may have some information on student representation in terms of that. I know other institutions like the Education Trust have various research and reports as it relates to higher education for students of color. So I think those are some of the resources that come to mind initially.
Thank you. We do have two answers in the question answers. Dr. Michael Couch stated Indiana does have a predominantly Black institution with Martin University that is an untapped resource. And Katrin Danielson, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta have articulation with IUPUI in the School of Engineering and Technology. And those are all the questions in our chat. I want to thank you for attending this session. Please remember to fill out the survey that's at the end. And this survey will help us with planning next year's conference. Again, thank you, everyone. Wait a minute, someone just put something else. Wait, maybe another question. Oh, Melissa Wagley just wanted to say thank you. Again, thank you, everyone, for being a part of this HBCU panel presentation. We thank all of our wonderful, wonderful presenters. And please complete the survey. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.